My next guest has been predicting economic trends for, years. 20-some years ago, I was already reading his work. And the impact it has had, I mean, he's the best-selling author of books like The Demographic Cliff, The Sale of a Lifetime. He's the founder of Dent Research. His name is Harry Dent. Welcome to the show, sir. How are you doing?
Oh, good to be here, Josh.
Oh, great to have you. Great to have you. So, you have predicted some pretty scary stuff and with some eerie accuracy. And you have a new book, 0 Hour. What are we looking at next?
Well, first of all, Josh, I predicted the greatest boom in history back in the 1980s when nobody saw the U.S. rising and Japan falling. Now, yes, we've seen the greatest boom in history. We've even seen, since Trump got elected by surprise, where I predicted, I was cautious in the markets back then because they're very bubbly, but I said, no, the markets see a tax cut coming and they're going to go up 20-25%. So I think this is the last stage of a bubble that's been stretched and stretched and stretched, even beyond baby boom spending and all the things we predicted in the 90s and roaring 2000s. And, this thing's getting ready to blow. And investors and businesses need to protect themselves and hunker down and get safe and wait for this bubble. Bubbles always burst. And people keep asking me, why couldn't it be different this time? Why couldn't we have a soft landing? I'm like, hey, that's a possibility, like 1 out of a million. I've studied history. No bubble, any time in history, and anything from tulips to stocks to real estate has ever burst and had a soft landing. They burst dramatically. And in fact, I just documented in my newsletter the last 6 great bubbles of the last century in stocks. The average first crash, just the first crash, was 41% in 2.6 months. And then the ultimate crash averaged 80%. This is not a time to listen to your stockbroker and say, I'm going to hold through this and wait for stocks to go higher. You're not going to see stocks higher than 23,000 in the Dow for probably the rest of life for most investors.
Wow. See, now that's a pretty bold statement because the administration and people who are riding this wave, man, they're saying, this is great times. It's just starting. They're expecting this to carry out another 3.5 to maybe 7.5 years.
Yeah.
And we don't have to worry about it.
And that's what the greatest economists in the roaring 20s, 1 month before the stock market peak, said we're in a new plateau of prosperity. That's exactly, and Janet Yellen just said months ago, we will not see another financial crisis in our lifetimes. I'm like, that's when you worry.
Yeah, they said the Titanic wouldn't sink either.
Heaven's in heaven, but not on earth.
Well, and are we not seeing kind of indicators of this? One thing that kind of gets to me, and I love the innovation, but one thing that gets to me is Tesla. Tesla is a great example of a company that doesn't have the production to actually warrant the stock price. They're more valuable than GM, and GM is actually selling a lot of cars.
Exactly.
So it's a lot of
this is what happened. At the top of the tech boom, you had companies worth like 400 times earnings. I don't care how good a company is, and AOL was one of the leaders back then. There's no way they could have fulfilled those expectations. There's no way Tesla can. Tesla is producing upscale cars, and guess what our demographic research says? Upscale cars are peaking forever for the baby boomers. This is the worst time to be a car company, especially an upscale car company. So, yes, Tesla's overvalued. It's an innovative company, no doubt about it, and he wants to do a lot of things. He's actually more into batteries for houses, and that might be a better long-term business. But would I buy Tesla at these prices? No way. The bubble.
Well, it is, but we refuse to see it. And you bring up the baby boomers a lot, and people love to talk about the millennials, but I think one thing that most people don't understand about the millennials is they turn 37 this year.
Yeah.
It's the generation coming behind them. They're not as big. We have smaller kindergarten classes every year now for 8 years. 46.5% of women in this country have 0 children. Are we about to fall off a population cliff?
Well, we've already been falling off. I was the only guy in the entire world that predicted in 1989 in my first book that Japan was going to collapse because of demographics, because of aging, because their baby boom peaked in 1949. Ours peaked in 1961. Europe's in 1964. South South Korea is the last major country to peak, coming in just the years ahead. This is a major trend that affects everything. Older people do not get more sexy. They do not get more productive. They spend less, and then they retire and do nothing, and then they die. And all of that's deflationary. All of that is slowing. And nobody gets, when Trump says, and God bless his soul, I'm going to cut taxes, we're going to get back to 4% growth, it ain't going to happen. Our workforce is flat for decades to come. It's actually declining for the next few years. Our productivity's gone from 3% down to 0.5% because older people are not more productive. And we've got full employment and have hired back all the people we laid off in the Great Recession of 2008 and 9. I don't care if they cut taxes to zero. There's no way to grow 4% because growth is workforce growth plus productivity.
Yep.
And it used to be 3% plus 1 to 2%. Now it is basically both are close to zero. 0 hours.
Are they
That's
trying?
why we named this book.
Well, I think it's appropriately named too. And are they trying to offset this with artificial intelligence and robotics? Are they trying to create that cushion for the bubble?
Okay, now this is another cycle we show in our book. I started with demographics in the late 80s and early 90s and predicted the entire 90s boom and the collapse of Japan just on simple demographic trends. Since I've had to adjust for geopolitical cycles like the downturn we've had in geopolitical cycles since 9/11, and still terrorism reigning everywhere. Innovation cycles, which you're just pointing at. Technology surge every 45 years when they move mainstream. There's always innovation in technologies, but in the early stages, they're in niche markets. All this stuff we're seeing with cryptocurrencies and nanotechnologies and biotech and 3D printing and robotics, these things are all in niche markets. They're not affecting everyday consumers in the broad economy like automobiles did from World War II into the mid-'60s, or the Internet did in personal computing from the late 80s through 2010. So, yes, we got innovations coming, but they're not mainstream, and the Internet has peaked, and the Internet has massive problems. My credit card has to be changed every 3 months like a clock. I'm being hacked. No matter what I do in passwords, I'm being hacked. The Internet does not have the security it needs for financial transactions. It's great for email and Google and stuff, and tripled my productivity as a business. It's the blockchain technologies. Bitcoin is just the symptom of a massive Internet 2 revolution that will, like technologies you mentioned earlier, make things better, but they're not going to change the world yet. They're just making old industries. Airbnb is making travel more affordable. Uber's making travel in cities more affordable,
Sure.
But it's not creating a new industry. It's just making an old industry more efficient in the early stages. Wait until these things move mainstream, especially cryptocurrencies. Cryptocurrencies are going to kill the central banks, which I hate more than any single thing.
Hold on 1 second. We're up against the break. We'll take the break, and then we'll talk about that on the other side. Don't go anywhere, folks. All right, we're talking to Harry Dent. He's the author of 0 Hour. And right before the break, you said something that I think is profound, and that is cryptocurrency will be the death to the central banks. We see that when the Dow goes up, cryptocurrency goes down. When the Dow goes down, cryptocurrency goes up. Yeah. Kind of explain a little bit why you think that this is the death knell for the IMF and all its little.
Well, first thing for investors, this is a bubble. This is an early stage industry, but this is an industry on our 45-year technology cycle in the book that I think is going to grow and be a major part. It's going to be the Internet 2. Internet 1 was about email and Google and accessing information. The problem with the Internet is it doesn't work for financial transactions because it can be hacked. So these cryptocurrencies and the blockchain technology behind them are everything I love about the new economy, bottoms up. They grow with transactions, not with central banks trying to stimulate economies. They are transparent. People get paid in little bits of Bitcoin for regulating the system, advancing the system, mining new currencies, documenting everything, and it's totally transparent. It's everything I love about the new economy, and I've been saying in my book since the Roaring 2000s book in 1998, economies and everything in nature already does this, grow from the bottoms up. They don't grow from the top down. There's no lion in charge of nature. Lions are just the biggest predators, and we've been in a top-down economy. The first thing that broke the top-down trend in history was democracy and free market capitalism in the late 1700s. And we're saying in this book, on a 250-year cycle that's crystal clear if you look at history, like the American Revolution and the Protestant Revolution in Europe 250 years before that, it's going to change everything. It's going to make the economy more bottoms up than democracy did in free market capitalism. It's going to knock out central banks, centralized government policy, social engineering, top-down management. The worst thing to work in a company is to have a bunch of damn supervisors that don't know your job or your company or your customers telling you what to do. This is the worst thing in history. I hate deal. I can tell a top-down company as soon as I interact with the first thing. People on the front lines cannot solve your problems because they're handcuffed by their management. Management's the problem, not the solution, is one of our key words in this book and all my books. So this is the biggest revolution we will ever see in our lifetimes. It's more than the Great Depression. It's more than the populist revolution of the 1930s with Hitler and Mussolini and Trump and Brexit. This is the biggest thing. This is a 250-year cycle I've been talking about since I started my research. I'm only emphasizing it now because Brexit and Trump and all these recent changes in the last year or so have said, oh, this revolution is beginning. And believe me, it will not end the way it started. The revolution is going to be very different than it started, but it is beginning, and people need to understand it's going to change everything about politics, everything about business, everything about life. And if you see it coming, and if you see this crash and these bubbles coming, the world's going to be your oyster. All you have to do is see it coming and get out of the way.
Yeah, exactly. And when you talk about this issue, then are you saying, okay, so the financial markets that we've been used to, they're just a bubble, they're going to pop, it's going to be a hard landing?
Yeah,
would it be a safer bet to get
in bubbles? And yes, stocks are going to go down, I'd say 80%, give or take, before it's over. And in the first 3 months of the next crash, which I think is likely to be early next year, it's going to go down 40%, give or take. That's what history says, crystal clear. And everybody I debate, even when I get with other financial experts who admit that stocks are overvalued and we may be in a bit of a bubble, they say, oh, but we're going to have a soft landing because the government's going to do this and that. Forget that. Governments created this bubble. They leveraged this bubble with cheap money, which always creates bubbles. And when it bursts, it's going to happen rapidly, and they're going to get their ass kicked, and nobody's going to trust a central bank ever again, and that's the revolution. That's what I want. I want people to say, we can't have governments like China top-down plan our economy. We can't have central banks set interest rates in financial markets because they don't know what they're doing. And
that's part of the reason why governments...
we're going to get a free lunch today like Wimpy and pay for the hamburger tomorrow.
Yeah.
That's bad policy. And I think China... I am so happy that China's done what they've done because they're going to prove beyond all history that top-down government planning does not do better than bottoms-up free market capitalism and democracy. And this revolution is going to make both of those stronger, not weaker. We're going to knock out the special interests that now have killed democracy. We're going to knock out the central banks and governments that have killed free market capitalism, and then we can grow again. But not until then. They've killed the golden goose here.